Alright, these are the test corrections for Math 5 Chapter 4 test. This was taken on December 21st, 2017. The scoring was there, you took 6 questions, multiple choice on the Google form. You guys remember that? Yeah. And auto-graded it. So out of 6 questions, normally I give you 2 points per question. So 12 points was multiple choice, and then from this test itself, front and back, is 26 points, so that's how you got out of 38. If you think about this, on this test, I decided to make 1/3 of the questions, or 1/3 of the, what it's worth is multiple choice, and 2/3 approximately is your free response. Question number 1, the most missed question. Make sure to show all your work and box your answers. Use your knowledge of reference points. So reference points is just mirroring, right? Right, you count one and then you count another one. That's how you get a symmetrical point. To write a quadratic function to the examples previously identified as unique parabolas in the problem 1. If not, if it is not possible to write a function, state why or why not. Okay. So the only thing I did is I just changed these numbers. That's all I did. I wanted to have the instructions the same. Now let's think about this. Vertex 2, 0. Here is 2, 0. Right 2 on the x-axis, 0 on the y-axis. This is the point. Class, do you see this dot on the given diagram? No, I drew it, right? Do you see these 2 points? Yeah. Up here? No, that's why I asked you on the test to cross off this graph. These do not match. Now, some students interpret it when I say cross off the graph, they interpret it as don't do the problem. I was just trying to help you to see that these are not connected. It would have misled you. That's why I asked you to cross off the graph. Okay? Now let's think about it. They gave us a vertex, 2, 0. And they give us a point 1, 3. Right 1, up 3. Okay, so how could you use symmetry to get another point on this? Well, if I know this is the vertex, red, that means I know it's the highest or lowest point, right? And at the vertex, it actually goes through the axis or the line of symmetry where they fold it. So I can use reference points to get another point on this side. Count to 1, count to 1. You see that? Then I know my graph's going to look something like this. You see it? Yeah. Then I know that's the minimum. Okay, let's think about it more. They gave me vertex. There's 3 forms for quadratics. Well, then I'm going to use vertex form. Give me the vertex, use vertex form. Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Remember, you were allowed to use 1 page of notes. Not only on the final, you can write down any formula you want, right? On your formula sheets or your maps. My a value is a value that tells me if it's going to open up or down. Well, I don't know that. I know it's going to be positive because it's opening up. My second clue is the vertex is 2, 0. Well, those are the letters h and k. H is 2, and the k value is 0. Now pay attention, remember in the formula, it has this minus sign. For some of you, this must be your mortal enemy right here, this minus sign. So do you see how I'm putting it in pink? You see that? Don't touch it. That's the reason I'm putting it in pink. Your h value, when you substitute it in, is 2. And your k value there is going to be a 0. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, just put it right there on the right side of the parentheses. Now, it gives you another point 1, 3. So your x value is 1 and your y value is 3. X value is 1, y value is 3. And once you do your substitutions, notice how we did this in class. You're going from 4 letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters. And after you do the substitution, you should only have 1 letter left. That's A. That's what you're solving for. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared. Remember, that's negative 1 times negative 1. Use your calculator. It's positive 1. Or 1 times A. or just A. A is equal to 3. If I have A is equal to 3 here, I'm just going to substitute it in the front. And in my equation, I need a vertex, so my H value is -2. My K value is 0, so you can put a +0 here, but we don't. And in your final equation, you actually don't use the 0.13. The reason why you don't use the 0.13 is because on this parabola, there's our billions of points that are actually solutions. We just used one specific point, one clue to help us get the A value. To get full credit, your answer is 3 times quantity x minus 2 squared. If you got an A value of 3, I gave you 3 points. Or if you wrote on your final answer x minus 2 squared, I also gave you 3 points. If you just wrote down the formula and everything else is wrong, I gave you 2 points. Okay? Question number 2. I copied and pasted the question from your previous quiz, and all I did was flip the choices, and I eliminated one. Analyze the graph, then circle the function which could model the graph. So I'm gonna underline some verbs. Analyze, so I got to think about it. Then I have to circle. I didn't give you any points for circling because I was really looking for describing the reason you either chose yes or no. So if I look at my graph, let's just note a couple of things here. I notice that my graph is opening down. If it's opening down, that means my A value is going to be negative. I'll just write a -1. There's one clue I got. Okay. The second clue I have is on the x-axis. This is to the left of the origin, so I know my x-intercepts are going to be negative. It's going to be a negative number. And if I think about it, I notice that the graph is opening down, therefore I have a, I don't know if we need it, but that's a maximum. And the fourth thing I recognize is that if it's opening down, that means this arrow, it keeps continuing, it's going to cross the y-axis or y-intercept. That's also a negative number. Now I'm going to compare this conceptual graph, no numbers, no tick marks, to what the information they've given me. Look at this one. This says f of 8. This is just the 8th function. Like you have 8 kids, this is just the 8th one. It tells me negative x plus 6 squared plus 3. Well, what are some clues I can get from this? Well, that A value, you can always write vertex form right above it. That helps you. My A value is negative, so it opens down. Well, that matches what I need, so that's a yes. That's a good thing, right? Now, if I change this, notice how this has plus 6 and the formula has minus h. I change the positive 6 to a negative 6. X minus negative 6 is the same thing as saying x plus 6. There's your mortal enemy. So my h value is negative 6 and my k value is a positive 3. So if you graph this, negative 6, 3, that's left 6, up 3, that means that my vertex, my maximum, is in quadrant 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that matches what I have on this picture here. So I was looking for the vertex for this problem. Let's write that, vertex. And then opening down on that one to show that yes, this equation does match this graph. A lot of you had some major issues. It's the same thing as your quiz, which you should have watched your video corrections, right? A lot of you guys write the word negative. But what does the negative mean? Some of you just said the word negative, and you're supposed to help me imply, does it mean negative that the graph opens up or down? Some of you guys use some really good words. What's another word for opening up or down? Some of you guys use some really good academic words, concavity, right? The concavity in this is opening down. this one right here, f of 7 of x. I have a negative value that's here, so I know that's opening down, so that's good. But look here, they have intercept or factored form. Now this is the same thing. Remember, we used x minus r1 and x minus r2, or you could use p and q. The big idea is that this is negative, so I'm going to have to transform that to x minus negative 2. And this one just reads x minus 3. So then when I'm looking for my roots, I did it down here, my r value is negative 2. Did you see that? I left out the minus sign. And your r2 value is a positive 3. So if you want to think of it, you can just think of it as the opposite. Well, negative 2 and positive 3, one of these is positive. I'm looking for both negative, right? We wrote that. X-intercepts are both negative. This is bad. I'm not going to choose that graph because the x-intercepts, they both should have been negative. These were both 4 points each. I gave you 1 point for writing your name, first and last name neatly, and 1 point for circling the correct period. That side was worth 10 points. Backside. For your response, make sure to show all your work and box your answers. Number 3, convert standard form into vertex. Standard form just has a bunch of A, B's, and C's, and if I had to summarize what standard form is, there's no parentheses. Vertex form, it has parentheses squared. Okay, so here is standard form. Mrs. Mapping, be quiet. Teaching. Thank you for saying good morning. G of x is equal to x squared minus 4x plus 7. So this is standard form. And I need to get to parentheses squared. So if you recognize that you need to use completing the square, so right here, this is called completing the square, CTS. That's what you needed to do. The most common mistake was to use negative b over 2a. That would be incorrect. That's what you use for the quadratic formula. Completing the square, you need to use the equation b over 2 squared. Well, my b value is negative 4. You take negative 4, you take half of that, which is negative 2. When you take negative 2 and you square it, and you get positive 4. You had to add 4 here, and then have a negative 4. Remember, positive 4 and negative 4 equals 0, and if it's 0, it goes back to the original equation. The reason why I add 4, or complete the square, is so that I can factor this. X squared minus 4x plus 4. If you use your Xbox method, or whatever you want to use, you get binomials, which is x minus 2, x minus 2. And that becomes x minus 2 squared. Over here, this is negative 4 plus 7. This gives me 3, so my vertex form is g of x equals x minus 2 squared plus 3. If you wrote down that formula, I think I gave you 2 points. If you actually did the positive 4, hopefully I gave you 3 points. A common mistake was not to have a negative 4. Remember, you can't just add a number, right? I can't just go to your bank account. You would be happy if I just put plus $2 million. You're happy, right? But what happens if I said minus 2 million? Would you be happy? No, you would not be. And that would be your answer. Alright, so question number 5, it tells you to simplify. What you need to pay attention to is what's between these parentheses. Notice how there is no sign. If there is no sign, it's multiplication. You need to do times for these two boxes, or two sets of binomials. I took 5 minus 3i, wrote it on the side of my box, and negative 2 plus 7i on the top of the box. Remember, it does not matter what goes on top nor the side, because multiplication, you can change the order. We're going to multiply first, and then we're going to add or combine like terms. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. Negative 5 times 7i is negative 35i. Negative 2 times negative 3i is a positive 6i. And negative 3i times 7i is negative 21i squared. Treat the I like a variable. Now these four terms I just wrote up here to show you that even if you use a process called FOIL, you'll still get the right answer. I took the first, these two terms are like terms because they both have an I with no power of 2, and I'm just adding the coefficients. Negative 35 plus 6 gives me negative 29i. Now this second part is special is because we learned that I squared is equal to negative 1. I squared is equal to negative 1. So this is called negative 21 times I squared. So that's negative 21 times negative 1. So this becomes a positive 21, and then I can add these two because they are like terms. They're constants. There's no variables. And then my answer is 31 minus 29i. Notice how I have the real first and then the complex second. I gave you 3 points if you made one mistake. Most likely the common mistake is not understanding that I squared is equal to negative 1. Or maybe you added wrong. I gave you 2 points if you knew to just do a box, because the box told me you knew at least it was multiplying. So that's how you got partial credit for number 5. Question number, should have done 4 first. Number 4. Write an equation for the parabola below in standard form. The number one mistake for this problem is to think 0, 6 is the highest point, or you think it's the vertex. But if I zoom in, that's the furthest I can zoom in, it is not the highest point. Here is the highest point of the mountain or parabola.
Where?
This point.
Which one?
Right here.
Can't see.
Oh, you can't see. Oh, my screen's different. Thank you. This point is the highest point. That is the maximum. Most students thought 0, 6, which is right here, they thought that was the maximum. It is not. So I wanted to point out that if it's not the vertex, then this is just a point. X, Y. So I have a point. That's one clue. The second clue is you recognize that these numbers down here, negative 2 and 3, they represent the roots. My roots are negative 2 and positive 3. Well, because I don't have the vertex, I'm not going to use vertex form. I'm going to use factored form. That equation is factored form. Y equals a times x minus r1 times x minus r2. Remember that minus sign must be there. So with your r1 value, that is negative 2. Your r2 value is positive 3. Every x value, I'm going to write 0. So there are 2 x values, I'm going to write 0. And the y value is 6. And you'll notice that once I do the substitution, there's only one variable left, which is a. 0 minus the negative 2, that's a plus sign. So 0 plus 2 is 2. This does not read 2 minus 3. This is multiplication, so that becomes a negative 6. So that's a times negative 6, not a minus 6. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6, and I get a equals negative 1. Now that matches the graph because I know that an a value that's negative is going to open down, and my graph opens down. I put the negative 1 for my a value. I put back the x's and y's, and my r1 and r2 values I have in here. Now, if you got stuck here, this is factored form, and up here it says standard form. standard form has the A, B's, and C's, right? There's no parentheses. So I need to get rid of these parentheses, and I do that just by multiplying. X plus 2 times x minus 3. Once you do that, you'll get x squared, combine like terms, negative x and a negative 6. And if you take the opposite of each of those values, you get y equals negative x squared plus x plus 6. I gave you partial credit. I gave you 3 out of 4 points if you wrote x squared minus x minus 6, which means you did not solve for the a value. I also gave you 2 points if you solved a equals negative 1, but you didn't get the rest. Remember, if I went too fast for you, you can just watch this video later when I post it, 6th period. And question number 6. Again, the difference between questions numbers 5 and 6 is you're going to notice that this one has no math operation. This one has the plus sign. What does the plus sign mean? I can drop the parentheses. If it was a minus sign, then I can distribute those. Because it's a plus sign, I don't need any of the parentheses. So I have negative 5, negative 3i, negative 2, positive 7. Just combine like terms. That becomes a positive 4i, and negative 5 minus 2 gives me negative 7. It's okay to write 4i minus 7. This is the preferred way. I gave you guys partial credit, 3 points if you missed one. For example, if you got negative 7, maybe you wrote minus 10i, then I marked that part incorrect. There were 4 free response questions on the back side. So that means that this side was 16 points. And if I take 16 plus 10, that gives me the 26 for the free response. And then I have 12 plus 26, that gives me 38 for the test.